Guns, guns, guns. Atlanta has been around in Legends now for about 3 years at this point. She was the original premium fire spamming cruiser in the game. Now that leads one to wonder if over the course of the years she has fallen prey to a little bit of power creep as new ships and changes have come to the game. Well, today's video will get to the bottom of that, and we can see if Atlanta is still worthy of being in your port and worthy of being on the top of the most hated list. So sit back, relax, let's get into it. So today's video, we are going to talk about the ship's setup. We're going to compare the stats to all the other tier 6 cruisers and finish off with some gameplay and some tips. But first, let's set up this match. Tears of the Desert. And in typical American light cruiser fashion, I'm going to make my way to the nearest island. And in typical blue team fashion, it looks like I have a battleship already leaving the flank, as I point out to him where some enemies will soon be. But I digress. On to the ship's setup. I am using the anti-aircraft module in slot 1, propulsion and concealment. If you are a free-to-play kind of guy or gal, Storm and Norman is going to be your man, and you could run some various inspirations. I personally have been sticking with a stealthy Atlanta, so for me that means Mikawa and Roux to bring up the shell damage a little bit. I'll explain more on that later. If you like to pay money for this game, well then Azerlay and Montpellier could be very great on this ship. Pairs really well with kind of an anti-aircraft build. Either commander, I use the same setup. Beyond range for starters because you have the shortest main battery range of any tier 6 cruiser. Igniter in slot 2 to bring the fire chance up a little bit. Armed and ready to make sure you don't get blapped. If you're using Montpellier, you could use All Out Assault. It's a very, very good perk. Fixated, and then the only ship in this game that I typically use EOP on, or IFHE if you're a PC player, is Atlanta. I feel like it's almost necessary on this ship because your 14 gun broadside is made up of 127mm guns. That is the same size as destroyer guns, 5 inches. So getting a little more HE shell penetration does help reduce your number of shatters. It does cut your fire chance by a lot. I think on our build now we're down to 4 or 5%, but you're still going to set some fires. We'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of EOP later. On to the stats. Survivability. It's not a word that is synonymous with Atlanta. This is the definition of a glass cannon, or more like a glass submachine gun, I suppose. She is not very survivable. Very low HP pool, only the Flint has a smaller HP pool. And at tier 6, we don't get handed heals like candy, like every other light cruiser 1 tier up gets. On top of that, the armor scheme screams, please don't shoot me, with the thickest armor being 89mm right around the Citadel belt. Your bow can be overmatched by 203s, deck and sides can be pinned by basically any caliber of HE shell in the game, so this is a ship you do not want to be trading blows in. The guns though, that's the highlight of Atlanta. She is bristling with 127s, and if you break out your calculator or your abacus and start counting, you'll find 16 of them, with 14 of them being able to fire on a single target at one time. So the shell damage is pretty low, and equilibrium of power is going to make it a little bit lower, but still, you're going to be in the top of the food chain when it comes to tier 6 high explosive damage per minute, and Weimar is no longer on this list. Now, the bad thing about EOP, of course, is the lower fire chance, like we mentioned, but you're trading that out to get more reliable damage rather than just counting on random fires to give you your damage. Again, we'll break it down a little bit more later. While we're on the subject of guns, your shell velocity is absolutely abysmal, and your shells at max range will only be able to hit the slowest targets or captains who are unfamiliar with how their rudder works. It is very difficult to aim at long ranges. At 13 kilometers, the chances of hitting the Surrey out there, the Strasbourg, are very low unless they're just parked and anchored. Torpedoes. You have torpedoes, yes, but generally they're just going to be a point-blank defense kind of weapon with only 4.5 kilometers range. I wouldn't say you're going to use them very often unless it's just a very delicate situation, or you're getting rushed, or you are rushing one of the last ships in the game. Now, where Atlanta really shines and what she was designed for in the US Navy is her anti-aircraft role. With the AA module and Montpelier, these 127s, they are dual-purpose guns by the way, they reach 6.5 kilometers. Total DPS, 177, which isn't the best. She gets kind of overshadowed by some of the other ships. By the way, has anybody seen Cheshire's DPS? It's kind of ridiculous. But again, 6.5 kilometers, the range is what helps this ship shine. She is going to deal a lot of damage at those longer AA ranges. Maneuverability. I'll be the first to say I have never tried an Agile Atlanta. I feel like that would be a good episode of meme or meta perhaps if I hadn't given that up, but most certainly I would recommend not playing her as an Agile cruiser. Her top speed is not great, 32.5 on this build. Turn circle is fine at 610, and the 8-second stock rudder is a little bit above average, but everything about Atlanta screams park and fire from behind cover. So again, I've never tested an Agile build, let me know if you have. Finally, base concealment is 12. Now I have worked mine down to 9.7, which makes her a lot easier to play. Without a doubt, you can move into better positions early on, get into cover before being spotted, and you can stop shooting and drop spot, move around the map. I really think it's probably the best way to go, and that is, of course, my humble opinion. So back on Tears of the Desert, and there will be tears, mostly mine. Pardon my annoyance, but I had some of the most inept teammates imaginable today and found myself a little bit frustrated. Atlanta is a strong ship. She has a lot of utility with her good consumables and DPM, blah, 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 but no qualms should be made about her being a support ship. She is a support ship. So carrying is not really the easiest thing to do in her. You can do it, don't get me wrong, but this is the epitome of light cruisers. The lightest of light cruisers. Terribly floaty shells, poor range, terrible armor, and low health. On a spectrum of light to heavy, Atlanta is a leaf. We started off with a decent amount of support over on A, we got, and then some teammates died, so that aided in my decision to start coming towards B. On top of that, the Nagato, if he could have got through the center of the map, he would have had access to our whole flank, and theoretically, if he knew what AP shells were, he could have wreaked havoc on our team, so I wanted to try and stop him. Now the seaside's doing pretty good, and our teammates are moving over here, so I just want to meet them in the middle and set up in a good defensive position, and this is American Light Cruisers 101. They excel at defending against a push, and this is when you're going to have your best luck in Atlanta. For starters, it's easier to hit ships that aren't sailing away from you, so never chase after people, especially in open water. That is a good way to die. So if you get really good at this and kind of predicting what red team is going to do, obviously they won A side, they're going to be moving to the middle, so I tried to get here in position, and that's how you should play her as well, and just try to stop them from pushing. Now again, this kind of loops back to my frustration when playing her. As a support ship, an island ship, much like Worcester in Cleveland, you need some pretty good spotting from teammates to keep targets lit up for you. And if you're out of position, you hope that you have some teammates that are going to support you in tanking and trying to protect you, things like that. The damage output on her, in theory, is superb. Best high explosive DPM at the tier, right? Well, you just have to remember that these 127mm guns, they are going to shatter on anything more than 21mm of armor. Now, a simple scroll through the armor schemes at tier 6, and this becomes a huge problem. Enter EOP, or Equilibrium of Power. For the PC nerds, it's called the inertial fuse for high explosive shells. Now, very simply in our version of the game, you're going to trade 50% of your fire chance for 30% more armor penetration. So if we do the math here, 21mm of armor that you could penetrate before, it's going to go up to 27mm of armor. What does that mean? Well, let's rewind a little bit and watch this Nagato die again. Sorry, dude. If we were not using IFHE, we would only penetrate the parts of his ship that are in blue that have 16 millimeters of armor. But since we took EOP, we increased that to 27 millimeters of pen, and we can now get our HE shells through the armor on all of the green portions of his ship. And that is true for a lot of the battleships at tier 6, like KGV, Nagato, Colorado, etc. You're going to be able to punish them basically anywhere. Now, the caveat. You'll be at a little disadvantage against ships like Scharnhorst, Nelson, Hood, North Carolina, other BBs that have thicker deck armor. Not only will your shells shatter on their decks, but you're also going to have a lower fire chance, so you might have more trouble damaging those really heavy armored ships. It's definitely a trade-off. I mean, not to mention that your HE alpha gets cut by a couple hundred damage, and that's why I use Roux. There are trade-offs. EOP is not overpowered by any means. I would recommend you go play for yourself and see what's more beneficial to you, what gameplay style you like better. Do you like setting more fires, or do you want that consistent damage from normal shell penetration? Currently on screen is really the ultimate example. Strasbourg, wrapped in 25 millimeters of armor. We're going to penetrate that guy everywhere while we're getting lots of shadows on the Francesco's deck. So just keep an eye on the little indicators over there on the right, and that can kind of let you know what's going on. Now, arguably, we haven't even talked about the best parts of Atlanta, and that is that she has radar. 8.5 kilometer range, and it lasts 25 seconds. It makes her a very, very good destroyer hunter. She also has sonar, 4.2 kilometer detection, pretty standard. Defensive AA would be good on Atlanta, but you have to give up that sonar, and that's something that I just am not willing to do. I feel like maybe 1 out of every 5 games you actually play against a CV. But again, in her destroyer hunting role, she is excellent. If you can get in close enough, catch a DD unexpectedly, you can absolutely punish them. You couple that with her stealth and making a good push early game, you can often catch DDs in a cap, change the whole course of the match with one cheeky play at the beginning. So the reason I chose this game in the background that we are, well, quite obviously going to lose. It's to point out that Atlanta gets stronger and stronger as the game goes on. If you have managed to stay alive in the end game, there are less enemy ships to contest with, to fear, to look out for. You can start making some pretty wild plays and accomplish quite a bit. So don't be discouraged if in the first 5-6 minutes of the game you haven't really done a lot. You know, in my first few minutes of this game, we might have only had 20 or 30,000 damage, but it can get exponentially larger as it goes on and as you stay alive. So currently in this game, we still have an enemy Gajmahara that we are trying to get. He's going to play chicken with us here a little bit around the island. We have an enemy Surrey, a Dallas, and the sharp teeth of the SAP secondaries on a Francesco over there. It is not looking good at all, but I tell you what, we are going to take as many of these reds down with me when I die. If I had to give my opinion on Atlanta, first off, I think she is still a global XP ship that you can get for 500,000 GXP. To me, that is an amazing deal. You know, typically a tier 6 premium cruiser would be 12,500 doubloons, I believe. So 500,000 global XP is a bargain. This ship is very unique, very fun to play. And I feel like that's what global XP ships should be, you know, something unique, something different, not overpowered, but just to offer a different style of gameplay, and the Atlanta absolutely offers that. This was also my original tier 6 credit grinding ship, and at that she is excellent. As we'll showcase at the end of this game, I'm sure we cleared 600-700k on a loss. The ship is excellent at that. Well, coming at the end here, Francesco, we're going to get him. Even though we're shattering a lot on his belts, we're going to get him, and then we're going to turn and finally get this pesky Gajmahara for a double strike. And that is going to close this one out with a little bit of a disappointing loss, but still, spreadsheet says I had fun. Overall, guys, if you're looking for a unique, fun cruiser and a purchase for your GXP, I think Atlanta would be an excellent choice. Just remember, she's a bit of a support cruiser, and you're not going to be able to do a lot of crazy plays. You'll have to rely on your team for wins, etc., etc. But do me a favor, smash the like button to help this video out. I would greatly appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe for future videos. Lots of World of Warships coming. Thank you, guys. Catch you in the next one. See ya.